And Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Dr. Algress,
Present.
Mr. Minchell,
Present.
Mr. McGlade,
Present.
Mr. Kazire,
Present.
Mr. LaFurla,
Present.
and Mr. Arthur.
Present. Please join me for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. Kazire, present. Mr. LaFurla, present. Mr. Arthur. Please join me for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. So much for the silence.
Everybody knows the way.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. And now I need approval of our agenda. Is there a motion?
Move approval of our agenda as presented.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any question or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Agenda is approved. Now I need approval of our minutes for the special meeting of December 4th and the work session of December 12th and regular business meeting of December 12th. Is there a motion?
I will move approval of the meeting minutes from the special meeting of December 4th, the work session of December 12th, and the regular business meeting on December 12th.
Thank you, Chris. Is there a second motion?
Second.
Any discussion or corrections? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. And the minutes are carried. Now we come to the public participation portion of the meeting. Anyone who would like to address the board may do so. If you're so inclined, please step up to the mic and state your name and address, and you would have 3 minutes to address the board. And seeing nobody move in the audience, we will move forward to the superintendent's report. Dr. Murillo.
Thank you, Mr. Arthur. At this time, I'd like to call Ms. Ostrowski to the podium. She has a special recognition on this evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I would like to welcome Richard Ronk to join me at the podium this evening. Richard is joined here tonight by his wife, his niece, as well as custodial supervisor Brian McAvoy, facilities director Stacy Pettit, and Wilson administrators Kim Kazmerchek and Rachel Bruce. Welcome, Richard. Dr. Murillo, would you join us as well? Okay. You don't have to worry. It's all good. Wherever you feel comfortable. Okay. I'd like to set the stage tonight for why we have invited Richard to join us this evening. On the late afternoon of December 15th, after most students and staff had left Wilson Middle School for the winter break, an overheated circuit on an electrical panel sparked and caught a nearby mop on fire in a custodial closet. Within a short time, the smoke and a growing fire could have triggered the fire sprinkler system, causing extensive water damage, or worse, the fire could have spread into the ceiling, causing more widespread fire and smoke damage to the building. Luckily, Wilson head custodian in the evenings, Richard Ronk, was near and alert. He quickly extinguished the fire and called for help. Richard's attentiveness, skill under pressure, and prompt response turned a potentially disastrous situation into an opportunity to prevent other similar instances through education, inspections, and training. For the role he plays at Wilson every day and the extraordinary response to this fire to protect lives and school property, Dr. Murillo is presenting him with the district's highest honor, the Award of Excellence. Along with a plaque in our Award of Excellence pin, which he can proudly display, is a gift card courtesy of our Community Education Foundation for you and your family to enjoy at Quaker Steak and Lube. We're not going to make him do a speech, but we have invited him to join the board behind the table for a group photo, if you would please.
Anybody else would like to join us? Just rather right in the middle here by Mr. Renshaw.
I'm on your side.
Down in the middle. And in front of you. There you go.
Here you're making me afraid.
You might have to.
Oh, scoot you in more? Okay, okay.
This one, ooh, that's nice and warm. Oh, let's fill it. Everybody say hero. Yeah, I love it. I'm gonna dangle just real quick so I can see his back a little better. Okay. Very good. Everybody good? Okay. Great job.
Thanks.
And unfortunately, he has to go back to work.
Excuse me.
Oh, yeah, it's two.
At this time, we have Dr. Borthman, who will present to us our post-secondary enrollment report for the 17-18. Dr. Borthman, the floor is yours.
Well, it's my pleasure tonight to bring to you some information about the status of our graduates after they leave our doors and head off to post-secondary education. And wanted to put this in a little bit of context with regard to why we do this work and why it's important. If you recall, a couple of board meetings ago, I brought you an update on the 2017-2020 academic plan. And in that academic plan, we outlined 6 key goals with corresponding measures. And goal number 6 in that plan was to make post-secondary education inescapable for all students. This directly aligns to both the strategic plan as well as the superintendent's post-100-day plan. And the 2 measurements that are aligned to help us monitor progress on this goal are the number of students who enroll in a post-secondary institution in the fall after their senior year, and the number of students who graduate with a degree within 6 years of graduation. So I want to share an update with you tonight, our first of many updates regarding the progress on the academic plan related to Goal 6 tonight. So if you recall from previous years, we received the information from the National Student Clearinghouse at fall and spring intervals that helps us identify the number of students who enroll in post-secondary education. The post-secondary report from the National Clearinghouse encompasses about 96% of all post-secondary institutions across the United States and has a representative sample from all 50 states and various sizes of school districts. So I want to share specifically 4 data points from that tonight to provide you some context around how well we're doing on these 2 measures. And the first tonight is the initial fall post-secondary enrollment by percent of cohort. And what you can see in front of you, as well as in your board packet, are 3 lines. The first being the blue line, which represents the percentage of students who enrolled in post-secondary their fall right after their senior year. And we are proud to report tonight that we saw a 3% increase from 2016. And moving 3% in a cohort of over 600 is a great accomplishment. We are one student shy of meeting our initial goal on the academic plan of 52%. We had 51.4% of the class of 2017. So we still have more work to do, but we're very proud of the progress that we've made so far and hope to make that up in 2018 as we get closer to our next benchmark. The interesting thing, not only have we continued to make progress on this over the last 5 years, but you can also see that there's been a trend change in the number of students who are pursuing a degree program from 4-year schools versus 2-year schools. And that nexus point was in 2013 when the bars crossed and more students started to enroll in 2-year schools versus 4-year schools. And that gap has gotten wider since 2013. And that corresponds with a national trend as well. If you have listened to the news or heard the governor today, you are well aware that skilled labor and career and technical jobs are in high demand, and 2-year degrees are helping fulfill those types of opportunities that are available in our workforce today. The second number I want to talk about tonight is the percentage of students who are freshmen and return for a sophomore year, and this is referred to as the persistence rate. And we've been relatively strong in our persistence rate for the past several years. We topped 90% this year for 4-year school persistence rate, the number of students who come back for their sophomore year. As an average, we're above 70%, which is about right at the national average where persistence rates are among post-secondary institutions. The third measure is the 6-year degree completion rate. And this number has also remained relatively stable at 23% of our students receive a diploma within 6 years, degree. What this does not include are any students who receive a certificate or a diploma program from a 2-year school. And this is somewhat misleading in that we know that there are more than 23% of our students who have benefited from post-secondary education. We are currently working with Naviance, our career information system, to provide a better tracking mechanism for students who are going into an apprenticeship or a trade or getting a certificate program or a diploma program at post-secondary, so we can bring you data that more closely represents how well our students are doing after post-secondary. So one of the reasons I think that we are continuing to make progress is Potawatomi Promise has been a great catalyst for us in providing greater opportunities for kids who may have not considered post-secondary an option and are now finding it possible for them to pursue an education beyond high school. So I wanted to provide with you a little bit of information around where we're at with Potawatomi Promise and provide you an update on our first cohort of students who graduated in the spring of 2017. So if you can remember back all the way to the fall of 2015, we selected our first 3 cohorts of students. So students who were going on to post-secondary as freshmen, students who would be seniors, and students who would be juniors. And that number has increased for the most part. You can see we started with 40 kids in cohort 1 and have grown to 91 kids in cohort 5 in 2017. But I want to key in today on cohort 1 because they've graduated. So cohort 1, we started out with 44 students, as I indicated a little bit ago, and 15 of those students graduated with a degree, which is a tremendous accomplishment. Now, some people will look at 34% and say that graduation rate is not good enough. When you benchmark that against what the graduation rate is at many community colleges, we are far exceeding the expectations, especially when we look at students who were disadvantaged or who were initially at risk, or students who did not believe that they were going to college before they stepped foot on the campus. You can also see that our retention rate far outpaced the comparison group of students who are also in a community college at the same time. And we believe that This data helps us identify that we are seeing some good things happen from Potawatomi Promise that we need to continue working on. So the last data point I wanted to share with you tonight is our continued partnership with Iowa Western Community College. And going back for the past 3 years, I wanted to kind of punctuate why it's so important for us to continue our work with Iowa Western and build partnerships with them. In 2015, exactly 50% of all the students who pursued a post-secondary education went to Iowa Western. In the past 2 years, that number has grown 10%. We're now at 60% of all the students who pursue post-secondary education in Council Bluffs go to Iowa Western. And if you've not been on Iowa Western's campus lately, I would encourage you to take a tour. I'm sure Dr. Kinney would welcome the opportunity to have you visit his campus because it's not like the community college that you probably envisioned when you were in high school. It is a 21st century campus with high-skilled, high-tech opportunities for students, and we should be proud in Council Bluffs to have our students attend Iowa Western, as well as the other post-secondary institutions that they attend. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, this information is important to us because we want to continue to provide students with the opportunities that they need to add value to their lifelong learning journeys beyond high school. And it also reflects an important step that we're taking toward monitoring the progress toward implementation and completion of the academic plan. We are well on our way to meeting both of the goals, measures in Goal 6, but we still have work to do, and we'll continue to bring you progress reports as we make progress. I'd welcome any questions that you might have about post-secondary enrollment.
I guess I have a question. You had mentioned that 15 of 44 number for the students in Potawatomi Promise, and that we feel these students are the most at risk or potentially risk learners. Are we graduating those students? I mean, that comment's interesting to me. Are we graduating those ones that we were feeling most at risk, or are we graduating those who had the most supports? I'm just curious on the breakdown of those students who did graduate, if we have looked through to see what else we need to do to ramp that number up, or what other factors might have caused.
So the only information we get back from Iowa Western is that 15 out of the 44 graduated.
Right.
So as you know, once they leave our doorsteps, we pass them off into the very able hands of our colleagues at Iowa Western, and hope that we've provided them what they need to be successful. I will tell you that we have experienced some things that have worked and some things that have not worked so well in the cohort program. Intrusive advising is one that we believe really makes a difference. We have found the cohorting of students to make a difference at Iowa Western. We also have found that students who live on campus and stay on campus and are attached to campus are more likely to graduate than those students who may commute to campus. And so that's an important feature of the Potawatomi Promise initiative, that we currently provide housing and meal plans for those students who want it and who need it. There are things that we've made adjustments in each of the cohorts as we've gone along the way. And we work closely with the Academic Advising and Student Services Department at Iowa Western. We meet about once a month to get feedback on things that have gone well and things that have not gone well. I can tell you one thing that we know that has not gone well, and that is having students well prepared with an articulated career plan when they graduate. If you remember at being in any of the Potawatomi Promise breakfasts, when students walk across the stage and they say what their major is going to be, many of them may not have articulated career goals that are well in line with the courses or the pathways that they have started down. Many of them believe that they want to go to Iowa Western and they're going to be a physician or they're going to be an attorney, well, in actuality, they may end up in healthcare or criminal justice. but their career may be different than what they believe it may be. And so we've really ramped up our supports, especially in Potawatomi Promise, with helping students identify realistic career goals that then have articulated course sequences at Iowa Western so that they end up on pathways to rewarding careers and not coursework to nowhere. So that was probably the biggest lesson that we've learned so far.
Right.
But I'm sure there will be more as we learn.
I would think, I mean, like in my mind, it's hard to have a 19 or 20-year-old know what they want to do anyway. When I'm a 46-year-old, I kind of finally know what I want to do, maybe.
Well, we're selecting kids
You know?
at 16,
Well,
which makes
right.
it even more difficult. You know,
Right.
kids are coming into Potawatomi Promise at the end of their sophomore year. And we're kind of asking them at that point, kind of, what do you want to do? And if we can get them into a field or an area of interest, we can help provide the advisement that kind of pushes them into opportunities for careers down the road. But I will be honest with you, it's not something that we have put as much investment in as we should. That's why we brought to you last year our goal with advising and Naviance of providing better career counseling for kids so that they see what the pathways are that are available to them beyond high school.
Well, if I remember correctly, that cohort 1 didn't receive any of the secondary programming that's currently in place for these students. And that 34% graduation rate is much higher than the normal graduation rate at Iowa Western.
That's an excellent point. In fact, not only did they have cohort 1, not only had no intervention, these are kids that we picked at the end of their senior year that
Right.
didn't even think they were going to post-secondary.
Right. Do we know the 4-year number has always been alarming to me. Our 4-year enrollment numbers, right out of high school. How do those track with, is this 30% of normal? What's a normal number for 4-year college enrollment?
In your board packet, I provided the top line was the benchmark, and that would represent schools that look like us demographically. And so we are getting very close to being on target with the norm group. And it has fluctuated. Nationally, it has decreased over the past several years. Post-secondary enrollment rates, especially in 4-year institutions, but nationally have gone down. Much of that is attributed to the economy, high student debt, insecurity in the workforce, high unemployment rates. Students are maybe working to support family members or going directly into the workforce for a paycheck and they're delaying post-secondary. That being said, we have work to do. This, like I said, in the academic plan, we have an articulated vision for in 3 years to get to that magic number of 60%. The governor would like us all to be at 70%. And I think we can get there when we look at coupling both post-secondary rates along with training in skilled trades so that students have multiple opportunities for value add beyond high school.
This is my perception only. I have no statistical data to back it up, but you have that percentage of kids that are high risk that are going into Potawatomi Promise and the 2-year certificate programs. You have that other small subgroup of students that are very high achievers going into 4-year institutions. And then you have this really large section of students that don't fall in either of those two categories. And they don't know what to do. And I think they're getting lost in the shuffle. We don't have the resources to help guide all of this big group here. And if they don't have it at home, where else are they going to get it from?
I always felt in our local society, especially, it's very easy for someone to not go to school, drop out, and in a short amount of time, they're working. They have a starter of a family, and it's a struggle, right? Yep. It's a real struggle for those kids. And, that's not up to the schools to drive those life skills or the desire to try to achieve more, right? But it's a hard way to start out. And, when you look at the numbers, I know some kids want to get out of their households and things and they get right away. And maybe that is just more and more career education in high school, career job shadowing and things like that. So you've tried to figure out what you want to do. But, I still remember the school board member up in Sioux City who was saying, I had no idea what I wanted to do until I was a 21-year-old. And then I decided I wanted to be a college graduate, right? And he was aligned with basically a tech path. He was going to be like he was like, I lumped into like a shop kid, and that was where I was at. And I didn't know anything different, and, it's like the need just to constantly reinforce and work with their families at an early age so that they know that there are so many opportunities available, especially to low-income students, where they could truly have, not that money makes a difference in life, but I mean, it's an easier way to start a family, and it's an easier way to break that cycle of generational poverty that we are so engulfed in here in Southwest Iowa. So.
I appreciate that that all of you are really focused on the improvements, but there's a lot to celebrate in this report.
Great.
The 2% and 3% increases in enrollment, the 4% and 5% increases in enrollment within 2 years or a year after graduating, the freshman to sophomore persistence at TJ rate increase is incredible. Awesome. So obviously the efforts are making incremental change, and that should be celebrated.
That's what we want to see. And that, much of that credit goes to our students, goes to their parents and families, and goes to our teachers who have really made making college inescapable, or some type of post-secondary training inescapable in our buildings. And that takes a while to build that culture, but we're on our way.
Mm-hmm. I had a question about the Naviance platform. Does I understand that correctly? It collects employment data? Because there are, I don't know if any of the, 29 students in that cohort one that didn't graduate, but there are plenty of students that enroll in a career and technical education program, for instance, that don't graduate because they gain employment before they graduate. I don't know what those numbers look like, but it would be interesting to find out if Naviance is able to do that.
It has the ability to, but once again, it is self-report. What Naviance tries to do is to create a hub of information that's so attractive to students. So it allows them to provide resumes and develop cover letters and send their high school transcripts, so that it keeps them in that ecosystem long enough that when we want information for them, they're already living there. So even though a student graduates from TJ, for example, their Naviance account doesn't get shut off. It continues to allow them to be able to update and populate information so that as they go through their career journey, they're able to continue to access that information. So we believe that there's an opportunity there, as long as we get kids hooked into using the platform, that they'll be able to provide us with useful data on how things are going.
So do we reach out to kids in some sort of electronic media to update that thing? And what have the response rates been?
This is our very first year of Naviance. I'm sure you recall the response rates we had from the senior surveys. They're not great. We phone call, we social media, we snail mail, and we found in various years that most likely the people that are actually answering the surveys are the parents.
I thought that I'd heard conversations that the Department of Education and the Department of Labor were going to start working together by tracking people by social security number, and not necessarily just relying on the National Student Clearinghouse to provide that kind of data to, well, at that time it was for post-secondary institutions, but.
Sure. That would be interesting.
Easy.
Should be.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in my mind, I wonder what do we define success at as if that's somebody's got a job and they're gainfully employed above a certain amount, they're able to afford to live. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
That breakdown, but yeah. All right.
Okay, at this time, Dr. Borthman is on a what would we say, marathon tonight.
Yeah.
And he is going to bring forth now a report on our 2017 state report card.
So I wanted to provide just a little bit of additional context for the board tonight, and then open it up for any conversation that you might have or feedback about the state report card. But the state report card was released in late December. And if you recall, the state report card really is a searchable database that has 3 years of longitudinal data for Iowa public schools only. It does not include parochial schools, nor does it include any private schools. And each school is assigned a rating or a label that's based on a culmination of different measures, which then get translated into a static score. Then those scores are all lined up. There are cuts made, and then individual groups of cut scores are assigned the rating. And so we wanted to provide just a brief overview tonight about where we're at on the Iowa report card and give you a little bit of context for how the report card actually works behind the scenes. So if you go to the Iowa Department of Education's website, you'll see a link for the state report card, and you can search for any school by name or by geographic location or AEA. And you can look and see how they've done academically for the last 3 years and compare them accordingly. Schools are assigned ratings based on 6 different categories. They range from exceptional being the highest category to priority being the lowest category. Each category has a different range of cut scores that are assigned to it. And these ranges of scores are represented based on the normal distribution of the bell curve. So this assumes that if you lined all the schools up from their highest score to their lowest score and drew a line right in the middle, that you would have half of the schools on one side and half of the schools on the other side. And then within each standard deviation, there are 3 on one side and 3 in the other, and that schools would fall within those normal ranges. These cut scores have remained constant for the past 3 years. We do know that they will be changing that in the future. They will not leave that those cut scores the same, because they will renorm after they get all of the indicators put into the plan. So that being said, eventually there will always be schools that are priority, and there will always be schools that are exceptional, because they all have to fall within this normal distribution of variance. So I'm going to take you down into the weeds, so buckle up for a minute. I'm going to take you down into how we judge whether or not schools are doing a good job or not based on the report card, and help you see what measures actually go into coming up with an overall score that then translates into a rating. So each grade level band has the same scores. The same categories where they're measured. The only difference is that, for example, high schools have a graduation rate, whereas middle schools and elementary schools do not. So those measures are not included for them. The same can be said for on track for college and career readiness. Those determinations are not made at elementary school, but they are made at middle school and high school. So what you see are the percentages of how each of those measures are weighted. So you can see that the first line of proficiency carries the greatest amount of weight among all 3 grade levels. Proficiency is defined by the percentage of students who are proficient or advanced on the Iowa assessment in math and reading. So they smash those 2 scores together for every kid, come up with a proficiency rate for the school, and then they multiply that by 22% or 25% or 28%. Then the next 3 measures are all related to how much variance is there between the normal group of students or the bulk of the students and those who are in a subgroup. So the first one is what we call the achievement gap within our subgroups or programs. So you would have a group of students who do not qualify for free or reduced lunch, do not have an individualized education plan, and are not English language learners. They would all be in a group. Then you would have any student who meets any one of those three, and then they're in a group. And they look to see, based on Iowa assessments in math and reading, how much distance is there between the achievement of those two. That's called the gap. They do the same thing for race and ethnicity in a school. They take all students who are not identified as minority, and they take all students who are identified as minority and look at how much distance there is between their achievement within a school. And then they do the same thing over again, but looking at what the distance is between your minority group and the state's minority group. So you're compared to both in your school and in the state. And those are all based on academic achievement again. So the first four measures are all measures of Iowa assessment, but sliced a little bit differently. Then the next two are based on how much students grow from one year to the next. So that starts in grade 3 and goes all the way up to grade 11. And they're looking at how much growth do students make toward meeting the college and career readiness benchmark. And the college and career readiness benchmark is the 75th percentile on Iowa assessments. They've determined that the 75th percentile represents a 22 on the ACT. So what we're looking at is a predictor of a predictor of a predictor, okay? So that is worth between 11 and 14% once again on the Iowa assessment. And then the next one is, do they make growth annually? So are you seeing progress along the way, that they're making what would be considered average growth? So they set a trajectory for every kid that if you're going to meet proficiency at the end of your 11th grade year and you're in your 3rd grade year, what points do you have to hit along the way? And if you meet those points, then you are making growth. If you're not making those points, then you're not making growth. And so that's a percentage as well. Then the next one is, are you on track for college and career readiness? So once again, looking at growth on that trajectory toward the 75th percentile, are you making progress on your aim line toward the 75th percentile? So those are very closely related, the growth, college and career readiness, and on track for college and career readiness. So far we've looked at outright proficiency, 3 gaps, 2 gross, and an on track, all of which are based on the Iowa assessment, but sliced a little bit differently. So if you're in middle school, over 80% of your total measure is still based on the Iowa assessment, just looked at in a little bit different way. That gets diminished by high school because they have a few other things that they get looked at. They're only about 70% Iowa assessment based. Then the last 2 measures are attendance. So what's your average daily attendance rate? And then lastly, what is your staff retention rate? And they look at that by building. And they have some thresholds set where they think an acceptable range is on both of those. The 2 measures at the bottom relate to parent involvement. The first is a survey where teachers are asked to rate how involved parents are. And that survey was field tested last year. It was not included in the measurement this year, but will be for 2018. The last one is a parent involvement survey of parents, asking them how involved they are. That will be field tested this year and then included in the 2019 state report card. So that's how the report card gets all meshed together. So what I wanted to provide for you is a longitudinal look at where we've been through the past 5 years based on the lens that I just provided you. What this helps us do is it provides us kind of a longitudinal look. Or are we getting better? Do we see progress being made? Are there things that we should celebrate? And are there opportunities for us to grow and get better? And the answer is yes on both accounts. There are things for us to celebrate. The first one is we are the only school district in the UEN that did not have any schools in the lowest category. And that's something to be proud of. That's something to be very proud of. And several of our schools have made good progress toward making sure that was the case. We also have several schools that made some great growth over time. Roosevelt grew actually 2 categories in a single year, from 16 to 17. Franklin moved a category from 16 to 17. And Carter Lake moved a category from 16 to 17. All of our schools either improved or maintained their rating from the previous year. So that's something that we should be celebrating. But we've not arrived either. There are labels up there that I do not want attached to our schools. I believe all of our schools, if you spend time inside of them, you will be proud of what you see going on. But we can continue to get better. And that's what I want to make sure that I think we should be celebrating the work of our staff and the good work that they're doing and continuing to push the academic needle to make sure that our students are achieving at high levels. I know you've heard me say it in the past. I'm not convinced that this is the best way for us to evaluate what's going on in our schools, but we will take it for what it provides for us. And that is, it does provide us a tool to compare growth among schools that maybe look like us or that we are using as benchmark or something that we're chasing. It does allow us to see growth over time so we can see, are we moving within those normal bands? And it does put the focus where it belongs, and that's on academic achievement. That we are committed to making sure that our kids are achieving at high levels. It does provide a great amount of transparency. It's open for everybody to see, although our friends in the parochial and private schools don't have to open up their academic books like we do. And it's a tool for goal setting. It helps us pick out a target and aim for achieving an attainable goal. However, like I've said before, it's heavily based on Iowa assessment. And if you prescribe that to the thought that Iowa assessment is a good measure of student achievement in our buildings, which I'm sure you know how I feel about that, then this would be a great way to slice and dice that even further. It assumes that there's a normal distribution of ratings and that our schools would all fall within that nice normal distribution, that all kids would kind of fall within that normal distribution as well. I also think it fails to take into account that gap scores are not included for all schools. So if you don't have at least 20 students who are in a subgroup, you don't get penalized, nor do you get rewarded for closing that gap. And that would be a lot of schools in our state that don't have 20 English learners or 20 kids in a grade level that are in special ed or 20 kids that qualify for free reduced lunch at a grade level. Even though we pushed hard, demographics are not considered in this at all. There is no weighting for what the state even gives us additional weighting for students who have more needs, but the way that we evaluate whether we're making progress does not take that weighting into consideration at all. And unfortunately, when you have more subgroups, there are more ways for you to slice that data and more opportunities for you to not close that gap. And I will tell you, in most of our schools, our subgroup is bigger than our normal group. And in some cases, we have pushed back that you can't use this measure as a true gap analysis when our non-subgroup doesn't even meet the threshold for number of kids to be included in a subgroup. So think about it. If you have maybe one of our title buildings where 90% of our students qualify for free reduced lunch, there are no kids in the non-subgroup to compare them to. So the measure is what it is. We're using it as an opportunity to push ourselves even further, to do even more, but we're also taking it with a grain of salt, as you can imagine. So I would welcome any questions or discussions that you might have about the state report card.
How much time does it take to compile all the data that they use for this report card?
You know, the nice thing is they have all of the data. So I I would say it must take them about 6 months because they have it all in May and we don't get the results until December. So, and oh, by the way, this is a year and a half behind on graduation rate. So they're looking at the 2016 graduation rate for the 2017 state report card.
I was just going to say the normal distribution of all our putting our schools doesn't allow all of our kids to be above average, like we hear on NPR radio. I mean,
Correct.
I mean, in Minnesota, all the kids are above average.
That's right.
We can't have that.
You know, that's interesting because, you know, the difference between our two high schools is a very little tiny number. And one would go from acceptable to not acceptable like that. And looking at some of the closing the gap things compared to neighboring districts, looks like we're really closing the gap at quite a bit higher rate than they are. But that may be tied to that kind of that subset size and whatever else. So it's interesting that they would put this out. But I mean, I look at some of the numbers, you're like, wow, that's pretty good. We're closing that gap like that, but it doesn't tell really the whole story either way. So how do you know?
That's exactly right.
Well, I want to thank Dr. Borthman for putting together this presentation. I know that it is a struggle for the academic team to really have value in this, but it is something we're measured by. It is something that's published. So we do have to pull it apart and look at it. The hardest part for us is because it's distributed like this, how quickly a school can fall backwards or go forward. And it really keeps the staff from kind of feeling like they're, you know, exactly which way are we moving and how are we measured and what will be different this year. So to me, it brings some confusion versus really being able to lay that solid foundation or that road path for us to follow. So, but I do appreciate the work that you and your team did. I think it is helpful for our principals to see the data and to understand it, because if it is public and we are measured by, we must understand what we're measured by.
I have to assume this is just another one that proficiency and grad rate matter most heavily in.
Yes.
You know, so it's, I mean, at least it ties back to what you want to happen anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, when you look at some of the closing the gap stuff where you're 15, 20 points higher than neighboring districts, that's impressive.
That's right.
You know, and that's probably a story that doesn't get told, you know.
So very proud.
All right.
All right. Well,
Thank
thank you. So now we're moving on to the informational presentation. And this is the last leg of the race for Dr. Vorthman. At this time, he's going to present to us on the revised school calendar, and we'll let him present that.
We just wanted to bring you an update on the 2018-19 calendar. And you approved the 18-19 calendar in January of last year of 2017. And as a result of the superintendent's listening and learning tour, we heard a lot of feedback around a variety of issues, from snow days to school start dates to end dates to graduation to academic calendar. And so we really wanted to reach out and get some feedback from our patrons and our staff members about how did they feel about the current structure of the school calendar. So what I want to provide for you tonight is kind of a look at the survey that we sent out to all of our stakeholders. We received over 1,800 responses to this survey. About 51% of the responses, roughly 900, were parents. About 36% were staff members, about that 668. That would be over half of all of the staff members that we have in the Council of Schools. And then 11% identified themselves as a parent and a staff member. And so we asked them a series of questions relating to some of the hot topics that we had heard folks mention. And the first one was winter break. And so we asked them if they preferred to have a 10-day winter break from over Christmas and New Year's and end the school year in the first week of June, or if they preferred to have an 8-day winter break and come back from Christmas break a couple days early, still get out before Christmas, and then end the school year in May. and over 66% said that they preferred to have 8 days at winter break and end the school year in May. We then asked them a question about spring break, and that was whether they preferred to have a few vacation days in March at the end of the second trimester and a few vacation days around the traditional Easter holiday, or whether they preferred to have one spring break where all of the days were around the Easter holiday. And that was less conclusive. About 48% preferred to have a few in March and a few in April, and about 51% preferred to have them all in April. We then asked folks how they felt about snow days, and we got a lot of responses about snow days. And we asked them really to look at it in two different ways. First of all, do they prefer to wait and make up all the snow days at the end? And only 33% preferred to put them at the end of the calendar year. Over 60% preferred to have them made up in March, which is what we do right now, which we identify them on the calendar as potential snow makeup days. And if we don't need them, then students and teachers have vacation during that time. So it goes back to that spring break question. Do I want my spring break in March and April or just April? Those two things kind of matched up for us. Folks like having that opportunity in March to have a few days off. And then there was a variety of suggestions. 6.5% had their own idea of snow days. And there's a lot of different ways that snow days can be made up. And we looked at all of those and actually have been thinking about how we can use instructional hours and instructional days in ways that may give us a little bit more flexibility at the end of the school year. We then asked lastly a series of questions about graduation. Specifically, two different questions. The first being, do they prefer to hold graduation the first weekend in June or over Memorial Day weekend? And this was not as conclusive as we thought it might be. 46% could care less. Either one would be great. The June, first weekend in June, which is currently where we have graduation right now, was 32%. 21% responded they preferred Memorial Day. Now, it should be noted that on these two questions, we only asked parents who had students in high school to respond to these questions. And that represented close to 300 responses on each of these two questions. We then asked the question of whether they preferred graduation to occur on a Saturday or a Sunday. Currently, our graduation is on Sunday. This year, it will be on June 3rd, Sunday, June 3rd. 16% responded that they preferred on Sunday, 38% preferred on Saturday, 44% had no preference. We are in a little bit of a predicament where we are not able to use the Mid-America Center on Saturday for several years in advance. So if we want to continue to use the Mid-America Center, we will have to be on Sunday in the first weekend in June, or we may be able to go to Saturday over Memorial Day weekend. So those are some things that we have to weigh against each other. And then the last question we asked was about the structure of the academic calendar. We had heard feedback from the superintendents listening to her about trimesters and semesters, and we've done trimesters now for about 10 years. Has it made a difference? Should we think differently? Are there opportunities that are out there that we're not taking advantage of because we're not on a semester calendar? So we asked what people thought. And really it broke down about even between the three. 30% preferred trimesters, 31% preferred semesters, and 37% didn't care one way or another. So this is certainly a question that we will continue to look at and study over the coming years to see if there are opportunities, whether that be with career and technical education or our partnership with Iowa Western or working with other school districts that may lend itself to having a semester schedule, maybe benefit our students in another way. So what we will be bringing you as a recommendation on the 23rd following a public hearing will be a 2-day reduction at winter break, which will mean we'll come back 2 days earlier. We will move the end of the trimester to 2 days earlier as a result, and the last day of school will be in May instead of in June. And of course, these are all pending snow days, and meeting our hours of instruction. We would welcome any feedback that you might have ahead of our next board meeting, so that we can make sure that we bring you a calendar that you can support and takes into consideration any feedback that you might have as well. So I'm actually going to pull that up for you right now, just so you can, in case you have any questions about it.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, I guess where's the current end of trimester 2? Would that coincide with any of the longer breaks at all?
Yeah, so what we have typically tried to do is put the end of trimester 2 right at that March spring break window per se. So that's where we would keep it exactly the same way it is right now. The only difference is that in the calendar that we are proposing, the 27th of February would be the end of trimester 2. That's up 2 days from the current calendar.
So is that then before they would go on that break? Or
Correct.
Okay.
It ends, and then they go on. They're either vacation days or they're snow days. Yeah.
You know, to me, it's weird when the holidays fall and the trimester ends fall at different times. And you look at this and you have a holiday Friday before Thanksgiving weekend, or, then you turn around and have, I mean, there's some strange things probably happen on any given year.
Yeah.
That make these a little weird to look at. The thing I worry about with the trimesters goes back to the AP kids and the, things that work with our college kids and, college, and making sure that makes sense. And I don't necessarily know that, I almost feel that that's just a future discussion we have to keep having, but yeah, it's certainly interesting. A lot of time in there. Any other discussion from the board? Okay. Thank you.
I like it.
Yeah.
I think people want to be home for summer and not home during the winter.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, makes sense to me.
Well, we really appreciate the feedback from our parents and our staff members, and our goal is to try to be responsive to their needs as well. So we appreciate the feedback.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
I'm going to move over to the podium and begin the next presentation.
It's all yours.
Senior. You had the car bash and stuff like
And here's your mouse.
All right. So before I begin, I want to also let you know that we have Dean and Jared from HGM here tonight, who's going to assist with questions that we have around the structure. And then, of course, Stacy's here if you have questions about any access to TJ or anything like that. And then, of course, Mr. Wilson is with us, who was, all four of us have really worked a lot of hours around this project, hoping that we reach a conclusion soon. For many years in Council Bluffs, I understand that there has been a lot of communication and talk about connecting the two buildings. And when the first thing that I heard from Mr. Burnett when I got here was, is there a way you can help us secure or connect my two buildings? Because I really struggle with being able to monitor who goes in and out of the doors, and we leave the doors open because the kids go back and forth. And so I went out and looked at it and saw why it would be a concern to a high school principal. And so then I began to kind of dig into it and talk with Dean and Diane and Corey around the kind of the works that Dr. Bruckner had done before I came. And she had begun some work with HGM and looking at what that connector looked like and what they could do. And then it just kind of went silent again. So we picked it back up, and I really believe that it is pretty important for us to really dig into it this time and see if we can find a solution and reach that point. So many people have asked me, why a connector? Why do you believe you really need this? And the main thing is the ability to secure the high school and the activities or athletic facility. It will, with the plans of the First Avenue corridor, and to really begin through that master plan and the study that was done by the city of the West Broadway corridor, it is going to put in a bike path in between there. As I read that plan, because as I had a little bit of conversation with Dave, I was in on Friday, and the Friday notes, I let you guys know that I was in the mayor's office, and they were all talking a conversation that I seemed to be kind of out of the loop on. But I knew there was something that had been going on because they were all talking the same language, and I'm trying to figure out what that language was. Well, I come to find out that's the West Broadway corridor plan and the study that was done back in 2015. And from that, it states that down First Avenue, that they would have a recreational kind of pathway for our community to walk through, and then also for bikes to travel through. And so with that going to take place, and the city is working on that, we want to be able, and when we go through the plans, I'll be able to show you how to secure the high school and how this will happen. We also want to make sure that we create that separation between the bike trail and our students. And then we want to protect our students from the elements, like the rain and the snow, that as they move through. So I already mentioned kind of that plan that I dug into. One of the things that this will do for our district with the city is create a true partnership around this plan that we will develop and really pull together the beautification of First Avenue down on that end as we go through the plans. I believe you'll agree with that. And another piece is the pride. Once you see the plans and you dig into that, it's a really nice area that we're creating for our students and our community. So what does the proposed design look like? As you can see right here, and I'm going to kind of use my mouse here so you can follow with me. This is our aerial view, and right here is the area that we're going to talk about. As you look at this, you can see this is the high school on this side, the activity center on the far left side, and this dotted line going this way is our bike trail that runs right through the middle. As you can see, that's the area that they're going to run that through. So what does it look like a little bit closer? This is the proposed connector. Before, when I came to you and sent out the last pictures, it was all connected and it was all flat. So that we could allow for the bike trail to go through. The HGM put together a design that provided a proposed covered canopy so that they could pass through underneath and ride the bikes and walk. And our students would still have to go through this area, but they would also be able to, I'm not sure why that mouse isn't letting me follow myself, so I'm going to use it on the pad. So the proposed connector on this side right here is our activity center. As you go through, this is all enclosed, which we'll have better pictures and I'll show you and talk you through those. The covered canopy connects to the high school. So when you look at that, this is if you were coming in from the area of our student parking and our staff parking. If you're walking in that way, you can see the area that they have with the yellow jacket in the middle. Our students would then go through these doors right here. And as they enter, they would go to the right into the activity or athletics building, or they would go to the left to the high school. Inside this building in a few minutes, you will see we will still have to maintain one monitor. But currently we have two, but we will be able to, under this design, only keep one. The monitor there during the morning will be able to keep the doors open and watch as the traffic flows through. At the end of the morning bell and during the day, these doors will be locked on this side, and there's some doors on the other side that we will have them where he'll be able to push in a button to allow the visitors and the students to come in and out. On this area, you can see the visitors parking on the far left there. And this area, again, you can see there is the enclosed building, and this starts our open canopy. This walkway right here is your bike trail. This is where it is set up for our Community to walk down. This is where it's set up for our community to ride their bikes. And then as you see there, it is this area right here is where our students can then enter. This building, this door right here entering into our main building, it will also become a locked door. Inside this door, we're creating a vestibule, which you'll see a closer area. And this will also have a button that they will have to push for entrance there. So we're securing the building. This is another angle, but this angle right here, as you can see the people on their bikes and the people walking down the trail. What I want to point out here is the fence. The fence will allow us to keep the bikers and the community members from just entering into this area and going into a building. Remember, if they go into this area, this is the area that we're creating the vestibule. This is the area where we'll have a secretary, and it's also got the SRO's office in that area as the students come in. And I'll have a little more of a diagram for you in a few minutes. The other piece that we've talked about in this is the canopy there. HGM has told us that they will be able to, if this community city decides that they want to move the bike trail over some, that we can move our columns there and make that and adjust the height a little bit if we need to. So this is kind of the diagram so you can see here. The blue represents, if I can find that mouse again. I don't know where it goes. Did I see it? The blue represents the entrance into the high school. And as you see that entrance into the high school there, you can see that in the morning when they're coming through, that's the straight line. Students will not be sent into the area where the SRO is and the attendance clerk. After the day begins, we'll lock those doors, and then we'll send everybody through that comes through. You won't be able to just walk in and go into the building. As you come underneath the canopy, the same way as you see the little desk that is sitting there, on each side of those areas, I will make sure that we have a better mouse the next time I do something like this. You'll see the multiple doors and entrances there. When we get inside of the enclosed connector, you will see that there's glass on each side, and the monitor has sight lines for all the doors that we will have access to, allowing our students to come through or parents or community members. So this is a little bigger, so you can just see where the entryway is. Remember that the activity center is back here on this far side, and the canopy and the walkway goes into the high school. This right here gives you a closer look at what it looks like to enter into the high school, seeing the redirection after the day begins.
So how far is that inside of the second set of doors then?
We will keep the doors as we currently have them. And so as you currently walk into TJ, those second set of doors now will be locked after the day begins. Okay. Yes, and that will force everyone to take that alternate path into the attendance clerk area. So this is what the inside of the connector would look like. You can see there the station. You can see the glass windows that I'm talking about that gives that sight view. The other part that would really help with this is in talking with Diane about like our games that happen at TJ. Currently, when you arrive at TJ, where you walk up to the table and I saw this a little bit when I was at the volleyball games, where people are getting their concession, their refreshments, you don't really have an entryway into the gym other than to kind of squeeze through the crowd. This will allow us to do our ticket taking up here before they get into the area where the refreshments or the concession stand is. So this is really going to help with the flow, especially at our activities. And just really, as you can see how nice it looks and just the pride that's going to take place with the creation of this. So before I move to the construction timeline, do you have any questions about the connector that Dean or Jared could answer for you, and any about what that looks like, any concerns or questions you might have about the connector?
I guess the main question I have is just on the how do we, the more we make this a public walkway, how do we keep people away from it? when we have kids, when we open school and we close school, we have kids going through, we would have no real right necessary to run somebody off the land if it's public land. Like that, to me, worries me more than anything. So it's more the philosophy behind this, I guess, is what worries me, because I love the idea of doors or something that closes that thing in. I'm not sure, like looking at this while it's beautiful and I can gauge the functionality. The value of a connector that's not connected is a bit of a struggle. If there's, like this nice picture here has probably 25 people walking through the campus. That would worry me at school crossing times, in class, and how we would monitor that with one monitor when there's several hundred kids coming through there.
It would have to become the responsibility. Mr. Barnett would have to talk with the SRO and the vice principals. As you remember, in that area, as we enter into the main part of the building, that's also the area that our vice principals are housed. Mm-hmm. And so one of them is going to have to take on the responsibility during the passing time. We'll have the monitor that will watch the building on that activity side, but we will have to have someone that still monitors that. As now, I can't tell you how many on any given day is going to be going through this.
Sure.
But I can tell you it is a concern, and that's why it is. That's why I'm pleased with the way that we're going to be able to lock down the doors, that we're going to be able to force the traffic once they get into the high school through a certain way, and they just can't walk in and keep going. Some may ask, why are we enclosing the side on the activities and athletic side? And to me, that is the biggest number of students that have the least amount of teaching staff there. So by being able to protect and monitor who comes in before they even get into band, choir, weightlifting, and all of that they do over there. Remember, you've got maybe 5 teachers at any given time, but you could probably have about 200 kids in that section at any given time. So I need someone that's got eyes on that whole area, and in closing that and moving that out, I feel like it protects us a little bit before they get in. And then the same thing, we again will lock down both sets of doors. So everyone will, if you're not coming in at the beginning of the day, everyone will have to ask to be buzzed in.
Essentially, that vestibule where that officer is just outside the current doors on the T-Jack.
Yes.
How many times a day is somebody going to have to door monitor?
The door monitor on the one going into the area with the activity center, we will have someone that stays there full time. The one going into the high school side, it's just like if you were going into an elementary school, we're going to force them to go where the secretary is and the SRO office is. So that secretary, just like if I walked up to Franklin, Edison, Rue, I have to buzz, they have to let me in. And then once I get in the building, I have to go into the office. That's the same thing we're going to create into the high school.
What do we see this as a cost savings over the current, by removing the one monitor? What is that?
We're saving probably about $45,000 a year. Yes.
Okay.
We can't stop people from congregating under that area.
I believe the SRO can go out and push them along, because remember, we still own the land. We just gave them the easement to use the land for the bike trail.
Remind me the conversation of why we did that.
Was any of you here when we did that? Because I wasn't, but I've read the paperwork because Dean brought me over a copy so I could see what I was dealing with. And that is the only section when we were in the mayor's office. The city owns all of First Avenue except for that section right there by our district, our building. And it was given to us at one time. And so that is why we gave them the easement back in 2014, I feel like that is. Is that about the right time, Jared? To allow a bike trail to come through.
I don't think I was here for that.
This is currently the height of we would feel this would be the height of a streetcar?
Generally, the heights, we would have to work with the city staff when we're putting the plans together, make sure whatever we put in is a permanent structure. Dr. Morello alluded to it, the actual location of the trail, the location of the columns, all that was gonna have to get sorted out directly with the city. So that what we put in is gonna be the ultimate design.
Well, crazily enough, I feel with the streetcar going through there, it'd actually be safer because you would not allow people to walk on that anymore.
I can tell you from the plan states that I read. The plan states that First Avenue was to be created for recreational walking and biking. That was what First Avenue was created for. And so we have to be a good partner. And this is a good solution for us. Because currently, if we didn't put something like this in and we still had to give them rights to that First Avenue, we are just wide open from building to building. And so this allows us to set up at least some ability to handle the flow of the traffic, ability to keep those that don't belong in our buildings out, and it allows us to have sight lines. And it also provides, even though the canopy is open, there is some feet that our children will have to go out into the snow and the rain when they go over into the building, but at least they won't be drenched on the top. Their feet may get wet, but at least they'll hopefully stay drier and a little bit warmer.
And the conversations that you've heard from the city, they're completely okay with this.
Yes, ma'am. I am very, very proud of the work that Stacy worked with HGM on to make sure that this was in place to really support us. So that's a really good layout for us. So let's kind of move to construction timeline, because this is the one that has HGM a little concerned and myself concerned. But I pushed them to have a real robust timeline, because my goal is to try to get out of the way of fall sports, fall activity, and really get this moving forward. So as you can see, we kind of need a nod from you, not a vote. We're coming back at the end of the month for a vote to move forward with this. But we really need to see about the construction documents, and I can let Dean or Jared answer your questions on this timeline. But the area that I want to move you down to is we really need to get moving in the spring, in April, so that we can be completed by the 22nd of August, so that we're out of the way when the students are coming in. When we went through this PowerPoint yesterday, the academic team kind of was like, oh my goodness, we have so many summer school activities and stuff. But Stacy sat down with them to really look at how we can work around this so that our activities could keep moving and not impede, all of the activities that take place over the summer. But this would be our goal. We also need not a wet spring, but this is what we're looking at for the construction. Any questions?
And we cannot build above this bike trail.
Well, you mean like up and over? Yes, we can. It is something that we looked at. Our concern is that the students will not go up and over, that they won't climb the stairs, walk over and climb back down the stairs. They're still going to run outside and go in. Our concern is that this is about 1.6 to get this done and completed, and up and over would cost about 4.5 mil. Any other questions?
I have a question, Dr. Murillo. You mentioned the door monitor. She would be able to see all entrances
On the enclosed area.
in the enclosed area?
Yes.
Or on that photo there, I believe the door is just behind that gentleman. Is there a window in that brick wall to the guy in the striped shirts?
Yes.
Right? There will be a
Yes.
window there.
And what Stacy can, if you want her to, can walk you through. Stacy has positions that we're going to put cameras for what the sight lines, and Jared, if you want to talk to the sight lines, they really have tried to position this and look at the construction part to have those, because the other end of the hallway is where the other door is, not, and this other door that's on the sideline is on the other end. But again, the cameras will be on the doors and watching those coming back and forth between the two. So there will be cameras that will be stationed in that little cubby hole that they're in. And then there will also be cameras on the other side in the attendance clerk.
Oh,
area.
okay, so they'll have a monitor.
They will,
in-
yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So we're thinking this project is 1.6 million. And we were talking originally about a $400,000 to $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 when it was just the connector itself. What's been the major increase in the cost?
I would say with the first concept was really
It was just yeah.
real basic.
Right.
And it didn't accommodate a trail.
Mhm.
Being as, I don't know all the legality of the easements and the property transfers, but essentially to get the permits to build anything through here, the city is going to have to sign off on it because of the existing storm sewer, the significant storm sewer that runs through there, and the easement they have for the trail. As such, they raised concern with the significant amount of money that has been invested in maintaining this First Avenue corridor, to maintain this connection. They've been buying up land, maintaining control all the way west. So they had a significant concern with the plan. So basically, to accommodate our intended need and a trail, we needed to also beef it up a little bit to accommodate the fact that there's going to be an increase in non-student use through this corridor. That really was the big part of it. And then there is a little bit of effort on the aesthetics because of the attempt to highlight the corridor.
The first corridor was basically just a connector, simple to get between the two buildings. This concept is a little bit more involved. Plus,
Can you come up to the microphone so people at home can hear you? Thank you.
the first concept was real simple in its design. It just went between the two buildings. This design integrates more into the activity center. That entrance that's on the activity center will actually be removed.
It's been removed, yeah.
And that monitor is brought out into that enclosed portion of the connector. So there's a lot more that went into the design of this connector. And as Dr. Murillo mentioned, we wanted it to look nice. We wanted it to have a sense of pride. And the other one was just almost just like a canvas structure going between the two to enclose the space. So that's where the cost came from.
Gotcha.
And the security portion of it too. We wanted to make sure the students were secure in getting the glass, and the cameras and the monitors and the electronic controls on the doors were a lot more expensive too, that weren't in those original concepts.
Gotcha.
Who's monitoring the cameras?
On the inside in the high school, our attendance clerk, secretary that's there, those cameras will be there for her to see who's coming up to the door. Inside the activity building, that connector will be the monitor.
So she'll have additional responsibility.
So for a while, the SRO was located in that first office, and now it's, I don't think is, or is sometimes there. Yeah. How does that change that office? Their role in the building, I guess?
To get the security vestibule, we needed to take over that office, so we're going to have to relocate him within that area, which I don't know if we're going to put him in that office that's right behind there. That's currently one of the vice principal's office, but we're just going to have to do some juggling on where that person's going to particularly sit. And we have room throughout the building that we can adjust some people around. So it's just a matter of where we want to place him that's best for the building. And I still think within that main office area on that end of the building, the SRO is probably going to need to be in that area.
I just feel like we're adding more and more hiding areas around this now, where these angles and cuts, and it's like I'd love to have clear sight lines everywhere. That right now that is the main benefit, I guess, what you have is I can see everything right there, right?
But there's a lot of glass that you'll be able to see what's going on out there, both when you're outside and when you're inside.
Okay.
And when we're talking about the cost, the initial connector that we did not address any renovation work inside the existing hospital. And now we're changing that monitoring and that. So there's a lot more.
And it will be heated?
Yes, it'll be heated and air conditioned, yes.
Will the bike path, will that be completed in this same timeline?
Jared, do you want to talk about what, or
Yes.
Dean, do?
Essentially, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take care of the portion of the bike path that would be within our construction limits.
Okay.
Ultimately, the city doesn't have their plans together yet to build the bike trail. The timeline on that is debatable. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get our portion done so that when or if the trail happens, they tie into what we did, so there's no interaction between their construction and the students.
Okay, so I guess the reason I was asking is we won't have to come back at a later time and accommodate for that portion of the
In
path.
fact, we're doing everything we can so that this accommodates whatever ultimate plan does.
Okay,
That was a concern too of Mayor, and he wanted to make sure that we partnered and worked together so that we didn't create something that we had to change. And so I really appreciated that. They really want to collaborate and ask for Dean and Jared to sit down with them.
And then,
Those columns that go in there can be removed if they need to accommodate whatever future use the city might want to do. So trying to be flexible with the city and have that work. There's also a 60-inch sanitary storm sewer that runs in that area too that the city will need to maintain. So we have to work with them to be able to provide access for that storm sewer.
Where's that located?
It runs parallel to
Can
the
you find it?
building.
So which one would be a good design?
Any one of them.
oh, right there.
Just
Approximate
back to the other one,
location.
which one?
Which one?
Right here.
That's
The
right,
storm basically
green
runs under
space.
the center column.
Yeah, runs
Center
that
column.
Grasses?
way.
Yep, under the grass right there.
So what type of work is there or costs are we incurring around that storm sewer or this addition of our portion of this bike trail
Well, I don't think we're really adding too much cost. We're just
Okay.
designing this
around that?
connector to accommodate it. So where we're going to put columns in, we'll put them in so that the city can maintain access and those types of things. So it's not like we have to go back and fix something.
Mhm.
We're just trying to take it into consideration as we design it.
Wow. Okay. Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you all. Thanks. Okay, and we now come to the adjournment portion of our meeting. So we're adjourned. Thank you all. Still weird to me this.